Here we are, and we are off to a great start. So thank you for joining us. And we have Ian Clifford from FuelPositive joining us today to talk with our audience at Follow the Money Investor Group. Ian, thank you for joining us.
Oh, it's great to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Wonderful. Well, I look forward to exploring some of the details. You happen to be working in a sector that's incredibly exciting for many people, which is how do we make the world a better place and also invest in companies that might bring abundance at the same time. So really a combination of two wonderful things in the world.
That exactly sums it up. I mean, our focus is so much on what kind of profound change can be implemented with technology that we understand today. We don't have to invent anything profoundly new to make this happen. It's really just a sense of, will there be a groundswell around this type of change that is absolutely essential for our collective survival going forward? And that's really the principle that the company has been built upon. And we want to make sure that our solutions are commercially viable and also environmentally viable. And that is really sets the stage for our mandate.
Wonderful. Thank you for that. Well, I know the company also has some very exciting recent news as well, so we'll get to some of those key points. But I'd love to start off, if I can, Ian, because you are working in this industry every single day. I know you have over a quarter century involved in tech marketing, and that brings a great experience to a new sector for many people that are looking to invest. So can you tell me a little bit about the company overall before we get into some specifics?
Sure. Well, FuelPositive is really the culmination of a number of years of exploration and looking at fossil fuel replacement and renewable energy solutions specifically. We were introduced to a very interesting technology of carbon-free ammonia production developed by Dr. Ibrahim Dinser and his team at Ontario Technology University. And it is an extremely significant breakthrough and approach to production of ammonia. Interestingly, ammonia has been a commodity material for decades and decades and decades. It is one of the most carbon intense manufacturing processes. And what we saw, what Dr. Dinser was doing, was a way of producing ammonia efficiently, cost effectively, but also without a carbon footprint. And this opens up a whole bunch of very, very interesting opportunity for the company, but also globally, what the impact can be with this type of a solution.
Wonderful. Thank you for that. I know we'll get to Dr. Dinster and some of the details of that alignment of energy, if you will. But a quick look back at how the company started and where you are today. Can you give us a little summary of the genesis of this great idea and how you've evolved to today's marketplace?
Sure. I mean, we started life as Zen Motor Company. So back in 2006, we were producing neighborhood electric vehicles before anybody was actually looking at electric cars seriously. And then we became very interested in a solid state energy storage technology that was being developed in Austin, Texas. This is a company called eStore, which we ultimately gained controlling interest of back in 2014. We started to really focus in on solid state energy storage. And we ended up with a technology that was near ready for commercialization. And we were looking for partners for this back in 2018, 2019. We worked very hard with a Chinese partner, one of the largest capacitor companies in the world, who got caught in 2019 right in the middle of the tariffs that the US was imposing on China. And unfortunately, they had to take their look and gaze off of this opportunity and stick to their core business. So that was 2019 when we then started looking seriously at other alternatives to that core technology at the time. Now, interestingly, about 6 months ago, we were approached by a group associated with NASA who are very interested in the solid state energy storage space. And we have a project underway now in Dallas, which is looking very, very good. But we've decided that we're only going to talk about that when we have third-party validation of the progress that's being made there. And as I mentioned, about a year ago, we were then introduced to this new approach to ammonia creation that opened up a whole new opportunity for the company, and we seized it. We really went after that quite intensely, which is now culminated in an acquisition.
Wonderful. Can you tell me a bit about this wonderful news of the acquisition?
Sure. So back in March, we initially announced that we had entered into a definitive agreement to acquire the carbon-free ammonia production technology that Dr. Ibrahim Dinser and his team had developed at Ontario Technology University. That was then approved by the TSX back in sort of mid-April of this year, and we announced it, I think, on April 21st. The completion of this acquisition, that involved the issuance of 50 million common shares in the company that was divided between Dr. Dinser and his group for the sole and complete rights to the technology related to carbon-free, sustainable ammonia production. And that is now, that is now the technology which we are taking to the next commercial step. We also now just recently, about a week ago, announced our joint venture work with National Compressed Air, who are a company with about 40 years of experience working with modular scalable systems and working with specifically with the types of materials that we are implementing in our system. So we're really, really excited about that relationship as well. It just means that we've got this amazing commercial partner to realize the commercial phase of the development of the technology.
Wonderful. Thank you for that. And can you tell me, in terms of the investor perspective, how has that shifted the company? Those are some pretty high lift moments for the company's history. How have things performed since then?
Well, remarkably well, actually. I mean, we've seen generally a decline in our space over the last several months. We've held steady, which is great. And we expect that the further announcements around the intellectual property development and further advancements on partnerships will continue to build on the strength of the story. So that is all happening now, and will be all of those initiatives will be announced in the coming weeks. So again, a very good time for us. From a cash perspective, we're strong. We've got a couple of $1 million in the bank. We're now intending to spend considerably more money than we do today. We burn about $150,000 a month, so we've got a good cushion. But now with the phase 2 development work, we intend to really step that up. So we will be obviously looking for further capital to make and accelerate those very important programs for the company.
Makes great sense. Thank you for that. Can we talk a little bit, for those of us who don't know a lot about the sector itself, what are the applications of the work that you're doing? How would we see in our everyday, regular lives how this work will actually come to fruition?
Well, interestingly, historically, you wouldn't have really seen it very much, because ammonia as a material, as a commodity, is incredibly dirty. It has a huge carbon footprint. It's one of the most carbon intense manufacturing processes on the planet today. So, and 80% of it is used in agriculture, really for fertilizer specifically. So the average person wouldn't really have any exposure to that industry, interestingly. But it's been around for many, many decades and is extremely established. So, which is important because it's a known material. This isn't, we're not trying to work with pure hydrogen, for instance, which is a much more challenging material to work with. That all being said, the interesting thing that carbon-free ammonia provides for is application into our everyday lives. So one thing that ammonia can be used for is a fuel. So a direct fossil fuel replacement, which is profound when you start to think about it. And the conversion of existing internal combustion engines to run on pure ammonia is known. So this is similar to converting a vehicle to run on propane. You could convert a gas-powered or diesel-powered vehicle to run on pure ammonia. Now, it hasn't really happened much historically because you were sort of trading apples to apples, if you will. You had a super intense high carbon material in ammonia replacing fossil fuel, and it just didn't make a whole lot of sense. It was hard to really capture people's imagination when it came to this possibility. But what we see now is that the idea of running internal combustion vehicles on a carbon-free solution, so that your exhaust is basically water vapor, steam, and the fact that there's over 2 billion internal combustion engine vehicles running around the world every day creating, a horrible situation. The idea of utilizing carbon-free ammonia as a conversion fuel for internal combustion is actually a viable consideration. And this is where we're getting a tremendous amount of interest. It's like, well, hold on a second. We don't have to build all electric cars. We don't have to build, hydrogen powered vehicles. We've got an existing fleet or vast quantity of hundreds and hundreds of millions of vehicles that are set for conversion. And now all they need is the fuel. So this is where we come into the picture as a scalable solution that we believe can truly revolutionize fossil fuel replacement.
Terrific. Thank you for that. I know one of the key points I read in the research is around grid storage, and that's a key component of the work that you do. Can you tell me a bit about that?
Yes, well, I mean, this is an obvious place for us to participate in the imperative for grid storage. So you have wind and solar systems today that are not running at full efficiency. Of course, the wind is howling at 3 o'clock in the morning and there's no demand. That energy just disappears. It's not utilized. We believe that, again, modular systems that are our modular systems that are placed throughout the grid in key areas where the excess renewable energy can be utilized to produce carbon-free ammonia and store it on site, and then in a very straightforward way, consuming that ammonia during peak demand. Say there's no wind at midday and there's peak demand, the carbon-free ammonia could run an ammonia turbine to feed that energy back into the grid. So a very high density, high energy density material. Doesn't compare, it's orders of magnitude more energy density than batteries, for instance, and created that way is an entirely carbon-free storage solution for grid load leveling. So it's another very, very interesting application for it.
It feels like in the industry, this has been something that's been coming for a long time, but we're actually witnessing major strides forward to see this come through.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I mean, it's interesting because we've all been talking about a hydrogen economy for many, many years now. And the realization of that has been a real challenge because there is no infrastructure for hydrogen. The way that hydrogen is produced today is extremely energy intense and has a carbon footprint for the most part. And storage and transportation of hydrogen are huge problematic issues that have not been resolved yet. The interesting thing is now, if you search hydrogen and ammonia together, you now see that ammonia, which has a huge concentration of hydrogen in it. So the formula for ammonia is NH3. So there's 3 molecules of hydrogen with 1 molecule of nitrogen. You've got this incredibly dense hydrogen material in ammonia. And ammonia, unlike hydrogen, is very, very easy to store and transport and is much more stable. So the enablement of a hydrogen economy going forward is going to be heavily, heavily reliant on ammonia. And we need carbon-free ammonia to make the environmental side of that equation work. So again, this is, we see ourselves participating in all sorts of different aspects of the hydrogen economy going forward as a very central player there.
Fantastic. Well, and of course, any conversation today, there's a natural entrance of the pandemic as a topic. We've been going through so much on the planet globally, worldwide. Every part of the planet has been impacted by this. I would think coming out of this situation where we get to reflect, look inside about how do we operate as human beings on the planet, that there'll be naturally some more interest in this sector. I would certainly think that's probably quite likely, would you not?
Yeah, I think that's a really accurate statement. And interestingly, what we're proposing and what we're building now are modular and scalable systems. So the idea of decentralization of energy is especially coming out of a pandemic situation is so critical. So the ability for individuals or small groups or communities to produce their own energy in situ where they need it is a really quite a revolutionary concept. So agricultural, just as an example, is an interesting application. So today, a large farm or a medium-sized farm would store their ammonia for fertilizer, and that would come through a very, very complex and dispersed supply chain. They'd also be storing propane on site to dry their crops, as an example, and they'd have storage for diesel to run their tractors and combines and so on. What we're suggesting and providing is the idea that you could have modular systems on a farm that, as long as they have access to renewable electricity, they can produce all of the ammonia, produce and store all of the ammonia that they would need, not only for fertilizer, but the propane's used to dry crops. Interestingly, propane storage is almost identical to ammonia storage, so very little infrastructure change there. And then the conversion of tractors and combines and other equipment to run on carbon-free ammonia is also attainable. So suddenly you've got an enterprise that is basically energy independent, that they are, the only reliance they have then is on electricity, which for the most part is an extremely stable commodity. And they can produce everything they need on site to run their operation. So we're getting a lot of interest with that concept, right? Because
I can imagine.
Yeah, because it means that no longer are you subject to all of the fluctuations and uncertainties that exist within traditional supply of those commodities. So again, a very, very interesting concept.
Well, and the whole system of reliance at that point, if you're decentralizing and you're localizing the system, it's an interconnected, interdependent ecostructure, I would think, but it sounds like a great move forward. I'm curious, Ian, about the team at the company. You've obviously spent a lot of time and energy and resources cherry picking the right talent, the recent acquisitions and partnerships. How are you feeling about the year ahead in terms of next steps? Where is the company situated?
Well, right now, of course, we're focused on the phase 2 commercial systems we're developing in concert with NCA, as mentioned earlier. Dr. Dinser and his team are involved on a daily basis to support that activity. We've also have a lot of work going on the intellectual property side of the equation. So that team is extremely active right now. We work with Castles Brock as our head intellectual property and trademark counsel. So they're doing an incredible job putting together the IP portfolio, if you will, as it relates to this. Additionally, we have other consultants that we're bringing in to look at things like carbon credits, which is, again, quite a fascinating aspect of this. Ammonia and carbon credits were never mentioned in the same sentence historically, and now suddenly you've got a commodity material that is very familiar in the world being eligible for carbon credits, which is extraordinary. So you get a certain number of credits for agriculture, you get even more for transportation. So again, part of our strategy is looking at that. The other thing we're doing is considering licensing opportunities for sales and distribution and maintenance of the systems globally. We do see this very much as a Canadian technology. It is, and we intend to build on it as a Canadian-based product. So the idea is that we want to always have control of the manufacturing of our technology. That's the key element to it, is how our systems are built. And we intend to make sure that we build that capability on a quarterly basis going forward. We just want to make sure that we have full control of that process. And then we can look to licensing, again, as I mentioned, to different geographic areas or vertical markets as appropriate.
Well, it's very attractive to see a company so firmly grounded in its Canadian roots, and proud of that, and excited to explore elsewhere in the world, but certainly keep that Canadian energy. It's a wonderful thing.
Absolutely. Well, I think it's so important. And I mean, if you look at Canada just as an energy producer, as number one, as a huge sustainable electricity producer, number two, massive agricultural impact globally, and great technology as it relates to transportation and other related technologies that become very relevant to this story. It should be a Canadian story. And again, pushing very hard provincially and federally on this. We expect that we'll have a lot of support and profile as we build this story as a Canadian success story, and again, as you mentioned, exporting this around the world as a Canadian story. Very important to us.
Fantastic game plan. I would think government-wise, you're supported as well. There's obviously a great push towards clean energy, so you're finding that you have the support you need, and as each sort of doorway opens, you're being supported in that way.
Yeah, and I think it'll continue to grow. I mean, there's a big push to figure out what to do with the fossil fuel industry across Canada specifically. And that's a big initiative at every level of government. Obviously, emissions and creating carbon neutral solutions is a huge issue. Decarbonizing the North. So all of these remote communities that are a huge part of the Canadian fabric are now all powered by diesel. I mean, it's, you know, the ice goes out, they bring the diesel in, the ice comes in, they're running diesel generators 24/7 to power these remote communities, which to me is a very unfortunate reality. I mean, it's been a necessity historically, but we believe that carbon-free NH3 and renewable generation can play a very, very important role in the decarbonization of remote communities. So we're very interested in that as well.
Beautiful. Thank you, Ian. Is there anything else you'd like to touch on before we wrap up? I know it's been a very busy time for the company, some recent great news and partnerships. What else do you want to share with our audience today?
Well, I think just to say that everything is going forward to plan, which is really, really exciting. It's unusual to put a plan in place and actually stick to it. And we believe that we've got the team to make it happen. We've got the capital support to make it happen. We've got really significant depth in terms of our investor base, some very good institutional investors as well supporting the story. So we're very pleased with where we are today. Of course, everything comes down to execution. So again, this is choosing the right partners to make sure that we do this, that we can't do it all ourselves, and we acknowledge that. We want to make sure that we've got the best people and the best teams supporting the project going forward. And again, we're all about implementing, and that's very exciting. The core team is great. We're very, very active and responsive. And as I mentioned earlier, Dr. Dinser and his team are vital to this program, obviously, and extremely engaged. So that we couldn't hope for a better circumstance in that regard.
Beautiful. That's great, Ian. Thank you. I know we'll be keeping an eye on you. It's an exciting transition and evolution of the company, and really glad we could talk today. And I know that we'll talk again.
Yeah, great. Thank you so much for your time and really very, very great questions. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thanks so much.
Thanks.